Welcome back, everyone, to another fantastic episode of I'm going to talk and you're going to listen. And if my voice sounds like a blast from the past, it's because I'm recording through my phone. As I was telling some of you earlier today, we're at the big storm, and so we're kind of in the eye of it right now, and it's about 12:30 in the morning, and we're somewhere in the storm. I didn't look at the radar. I was like, doesn't matter. I could just look outside, and I can see I can see horizon even at 12:30 in the middle of the night. So that means the storm is crazy. So where were we? So yeah, the lights are flickering, and that's secret code in the Pacific Northwest to shut everything down and hunker down. So I had to batten down the hatches earlier today as another part of the storm was rumbling around. And I forgot to get myself a Gatorade. Well, I'll take a break here at some point. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. Going to talk about radios, going to talk about the city, the normal kind of mainstay topic of the city, because I got a lot to talk about there. I got a lot of author stuff to talk about, so I don't even know where to start. Probably the thing I've been promising the most. So if you're a prepper folks and don't care about author stuff, then you just skip ahead. I'll do timestamps eventually. So author stuff. I ran a survey a couple weeks ago that honestly really kind of pissed off a bunch of people, but there was a lot of other people that didn't piss off a lot. It pissed off a few, but a lot of people had really mixed emotions about it, I'd say. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I'm just kind of ballparking this now because my computer shut off because of the storm. And I want to say like somewhere between 30 to 40 of the people that responded said that they were readers, and 30 to 40 of the people who responded said they were readers and writers. Both, like 50-50, and then probably 10 more people said that they were just readers. And that kind of blew up in the face of a lot of the people who had mixed emotions about the writing, the so-called writing community in general on Twitter. And I feel fairly confident in speaking my mind about what I think about the quote-unquote writing community in Twitter. But I'm going to save that little rant until after I break down the data, at least how I kind of remember it in my head. And a lot of what was assumed simply wasn't true. And really what it ended up breaking down to is there was kind of a three-way tie between readers and readers/writers prioritizing the like synopsis slash blurb slash back of the book, and really about what the author was all about, and making sure that the genre aligned. Honestly, a lot of them didn't care about. There was a couple that said they cared about the book title. There was a couple that said they cared about the book cover. Almost nobody said they cared about reviews at all. And again, I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me in air quotes. The reason why that's interesting is the blurb is supposed to go. So I'm going to break this down a little bit. You're like, why does any of this matter? If you're a writer, you need to make sure you have a good blurb. That blurb is supposed to go on the back of your book, unless you're an idiot. And not apparently, I've seen this personally myself. Many writers were putting like quote unquote like accolades is like what they were calling it. Where it was like just these stupid accolades of like 4 out of 5 stars from XYZ anonymous person number one. Everybody who responded to anything about reviews and or blurb mentioned in kind that they thought that accolades and reviews were beyond idiotic and useless and worthless. There was maybe 1 or 2 people who cared about reviews at all. And one of those people that cared about the reviews read through them to try to find if any readers had posted any of the trigger stuff in there, and said they look in the reviews for the triggers, like something happens to dogs or whatever. Diving into that a tiny bit, I'm still on the fence about including triggers because it's a rabbit hole, and you half of your book could end up being trigger warnings, and I think it's really spoilery. I debated putting it at the back of the book, but I still think my little blurb at the beginning is okay. It's not amazing, but it's okay. No gratuitous violence, no like torture's not embellished. And the reason why I still think that's important is because you're reading collapse level material. Expect every horrible thing to happen, and I kind of get into that in the little thing that I was writing, my little self kind of demo thing that's new when you log into my Twitter now. Like, these are apocalypse books. All the other apocalypse, like, they're all the same. All the apocalypse novels, all the apocalypse books are the same now. There's almost nothing new in them at all. Like, they've kind of resolved themselves down into, like, what happened with zombies and vampires and werewolves, where it's all just the same. That's okay, because that means we've gotten to the point to where we can tell character stories. Like war never changes. But like they can still tell, there's still stories to be told. And when you're reading an apocalypse book, I feel like that's the only trigger warning that you need. The only thing after that is like how much like eating dirt is the story going. How far is the book gonna rip your guts out? It was interesting as I was talking to some I don't know, longish story, but I ended up talking to several erotica authors. And to my surprise, we share a lot of the same challenges. So similarly to like apocalypse fiction, erotica is like a range where it can be like super, super crazy or just kind of put you to sleep, which I thought was pretty funny. This one gal, she's like, I assume it was a gal. I have no idea. I think most of them are, since guys can't write romance to save their lives, but let alone intimate moments. So she was saying her stories were just putting people to sleep. Her erotica stories are putting people to sleep. I was like, maybe that's a good thing. Like, maybe just lean into that. Maybe that's okay. And I haven't heard from her since, so maybe she's retooling her branding, but that's honestly pretty good feedback. And the story I told her was that when I first started my YouTube channel, I worked really hard on all these training videos, and everyone said I was putting them to sleep. So flash forward years later, I'm narrating my books and doing my streams and stuff, and everybody listens to it before they go to bed, and I've kind of found my niche in a way. So I think that's cool. And poets have an entirely different problem. And I think the only way I think they've resigned to the reality that everybody kind of treats them like the redheaded stepchild of writing. So they weren't really fussy. Leave her food alone. They weren't really fussy. They just kind of they have different different successes that they celebrate. And kind of how do I say this? My message to the poetry writers was like, hey, maybe as authors we could do better incorporating like poetry in between chapters or something. But surprisingly, even though I said that to several poets, they really didn't want to have anything to do with me. So I was just like, whatever, enjoy obscurity. And I feel like poetry is for reading and not writing anyway. There's a really weirdo subgenre of people that like reading poetry, but poetry is really for the person writing it. So maybe they don't want anyone to read it. I have no idea. And then everybody else was like a smattering of fantasy and sci-fi. No surprise at all. None of it was nonfiction. In fact, in the Twitter writing community, nonfiction is unheard of. And what I will say is kind of rant mode activated, although I don't even know where to start. By and large, the writing community in Twitter is useless. Absolutely, objectively, statistically, provably useless. The writing lifting is useless, and so on and so forth. The reason being is that out of the almost 100 people I talked to, maybe a third were both readers and writers. And you're like, well, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Well, because the way Twitter works and the way the algorithm works is if you keep talking to other writers, the algorithm's only going to boost your signal to other writers, which means you're missing like 2/3 of your potential audience by dicking around with other writers. And I would say out of all the writers, the 50-50 reader writers that I talked about, the vast majority of them were absolutely fed up. They were extremely vocally fed up with supporting other authors in the Twitter writing circle because it just wasn't reciprocated. So there's writers supporting other writers and no writers were supporting them. Like it wasn't a symbiosis. It's just a bunch of douchebags screaming into the void. And I got some flack for phrasing it that way, and it's very leading. I can't think of the right word, but it was a very leading question. You know, I asked, like, is there any readers here, or are these writers screaming into the void? And the vast majority of the writers said they were screaming into the void. But very few of them I can count on one hand actually wanted to really work on it. They seemed to just be resigned to screaming into the void. Like, that's the existence that they seemed to want to lead. And one guy, unfortunately, had really given up, and it was really sad to talk to him. And I didn't try to talk him off the ledge or anything, but he's like, I have to take care of my health and I have to take care of my life, is what he said. And I respect that because burnout's really bad. I've done other videos on burnout. But yeah, I mean, there was people that I said, well, hey, I've never seen your work before. This was in other writing threads on Twitter. I said, I've never seen your work before, because they were bitching. This was before I made my Writing into the Void post, which had like over 6,000 views. I mean, it went viral. Hundreds of responses, and yeah, 6,000 plus. Anyway, it was big. And a lot of these writers just do not give a shit. They are so high and mighty and pretentious, and they just want to sit there and not do anything and not interact with anybody. And I don't even think they care if they sell a single copy of their book. And I don't think they give a shit if a single person reads their book. Because, like, when I try to post to the writing community thing, I was like, hey, writing community, share all your teaser trailer videos. I want to see them all. I didn't get a single one. I think that they're just there to complain. I don't think they want to help each other, and they seem to be on this journey of what I'm calling like fake engagement, and then there's flat out like troll bait engagement. And I can tell you unequivocally, that gets you 0 sales. I tried it for a month. It gets 0 sales, and all you do is get stuck in the Twitter algorithm with all of the other readers screaming into the void, because Twitter assumes that's where you want to be. And in this case, I don't think Twitter's wrong. I think you have a bunch of people screaming into the void, and that's exactly what they want. Because if they didn't want that, they would wake the hell up and start actually asking readers what they want. But they don't, because they don't care. They all think that they know the right way, and damned if they'll be told, even when you point it out with them. There's a lot of people complaining. I go, look, just read the thread. The readers, there's like a third of this is pure. There was like 40 pure readers in that thread telling everybody exactly what they wanted. I'm like, these are readers telling you exactly what they want. This is your audience. Are you telling them they're wrong? These are the people that are going to buy your stuff. Like, don't you get it? But it was just crickets, because they don't care. Like, they're just acting like they care. They're going through the motions. And I think that gets me to my second point, or 50th point. I have no idea. And then we'll kind of wrap up the writing segment of this for now, for those of you that are preppers that want me to get to the prepper parts. I've noticed, and my friend noticed this too, that even these so-called like based authors, which I'm starting to think that maybe some more vetting needs to go into some of these authors, but they have like commercially viable products, and you'll notice and you'll see that they've got hundreds of reviews, but their work is dog shit. It's no better or worse than the non-woke. Wait, the woke, yeah. It's all the same. And it's like they change a few words and just shit the book out over and over again. I call it like lowest commercially viable product. And that was when I initially got into it with that editor. And I was kind of naive. And I thought that people would want a story that's decent and that explored the characters' motivations and explored, why what's going on is important to them. And I ran into a lot of heartache and a lot of blood pressure problems and quite frankly, a lot of really late nights grinding out that story that some of you listened to a while back. And I thought it was a great story. I think it's a story that absolutely needed to get told, but I was dealing with a pretentious, idiotic editor that, can't see an inch ahead of them because they weren't handed a commercially viable product. And that's when I realized, distilling down what they want and contrasting that with what Twitter hit me with when I first kind of started interacting with what the algorithm told me to. And they were almost universally D&D posts. D&D, over and over and over, TTRPG, because even though that shit's existed for 30 plus years, all of a sudden they have to have their own little code name. TTRPG. Shut up. And, for weeks, my curated posts were flooded with pretentious Dungeons and Dragons DMs. And I already think D&D is just the most pretentious shit on the planet. Is it fun with friends? Sure. But it doesn't need to take over your damn life. And it's certainly not actually important by any measure. So, hearing all these snobby, armpit-licking DMs talk about I just imagine them in mansions sipping Dom Perignon going, oh, I can't wait until they stop explaining their character's backstory so I can kill them off for me having to sit and wait and listen through their petty motivations. Because that's the way they would talk on Twitter. They'd be like, if anyone has more than a 30-second backstory, I kill their character off just to teach them a lesson. You people are sick. You're just on a power trip. And it's you're where are you going with this? Get to the point. And I know that was the feedback I got. You're not getting to the point. I'm well, it's not my fault. You don't have a damn attention span and you can't put this shit together. So the point is I think a lot of these DMs is the new attention span. The books that they want to read are basically just narrated tabletop RPGs. And I used to think that it was a compliment that people kind of saw my books that way. But I'm now realizing that has become a whole genre. It's TTRPG genre. Basically, it's got some new acronym all of its own. Ooh. And it's just man, I was writing in front of a live studio audience when you guys are painting your little toys. My series is older than... Anyway. The point is that you can't trust the system. No. The point is that these books are written from the perspective of a DM. They write about shit that the characters in the book do not care about. They write about shit that has nothing to do with the story. They pad, trying to get their precious word counts for their minimum commercially viable product. And then if you try to hit them with backstory or motivation, they fucking lose their mind. But they'll sit there and they will write about the damn forest for an hour. Oh, the dripping mildew, like dragon saliva. Shut up. Like, it has nothing to do with the story. The characters aren't witnessing it. It's not like they're in a storm. We're in a storm and the branches are flying by like giant Douglas fir harpoons. Oh, okay. Well, there. Now that actually makes sense. Like, I have some context there. Or somebody's working at a job and another ticket comes in and they want to go on lunch and they open the ticket and it's really complicated. They're going to have to do a bunch of math. Well, if I start talking about, someone working on their job and their job being complicated, they're going to go boring. But they'll pad the shit out of it talking about a forest for half a chapter. And I was joking with my friend. I'm like, you can read like the first paragraph of the first page now and decide whether or not you're going to like a book. Because if it takes more than 2 sentences to explain, they're in a forest, they're in a ship, they're in space, they're underwater. Like, I only need like 2 sentences. Okay, I get it, they're underwater. But like, if they're in a storm, then it's like, okay, are they in a storm on a ship? Are they in a storm in a castle? But it's never that. And some of them have tricked me before. It's like they felt the sand in his toes. It was grainy sand. The sand was warm that day, and he could see little dimples in the sand of the crabs walking around in the sand. The sand was everywhere, and he thought about the sand. Maybe he could come back later and make a sand castle in the sand. Over there was a little sandy divot where a crab had once walked in the sand. Like, what does this have? And then an arrow hits him in the head. It's like, what does this have to do with anything? I just made that up. It doesn't matter. You only need to do that if they're like walking in the sand for hours, and you need to give the reader the impression, slow the story down enough so that it sinks in that they're in the sand. But instead, it's like watching like 300. You put 300 in normal time and it's like a 20 to 40 minute movie. Well, that's the way these books are. You put all this shit together, it's like, what does this happen over a couple hours? But they just decided to write about the forest again. But it's funny, like, maybe that's why so many people are drawn to sci-fi. Because they're not in space like space. The vastness, emptiness of space. I just look out into space and I think about all the space, because the space is just black and inky void space that goes on forever. No, they don't do that. You drive them insane. They'd be like, something better get hit with a meteor soon. Like, I don't know. I wish I had it all in front of me. I want to do a stream where I just talk about some books that turned out really well and why I thought they worked. Because I like this to focus on positive stuff and not negative stuff. I read a really good one where they're like space miners trapped on an asteroid being attacked. I'm like, man, I couldn't put it down. It was freaking amazing. But it's because they didn't sit there and describe anything that didn't need to be described. You could kind of visualize the tunnels that they were digging and why it was important which tunnels they were in as they're being attacked, and they were, mining in a part of it and they couldn't mine in another part because it was too dangerous. And they had their main little like fab area and their backup fab area. Excuse me. And, their suits. It described their suit. It described everything it needed to describe, kind of organically as the story went. And I'm like, dude, this is perfect. Just for some reason, in all the books that I've been checking out, except for this one I just started reading, only the sci-fi has been worth a shit. That's not to say all sci-fi is good, but that's just statistically how it's working. And I'm lamenting that Amazon doesn't have an F this book button where it tracks what you rate things. So you can sort by the books you liked and didn't like in the Kindle app. It's kind of dumb for a multi-trillion-dollar company to not have the rating system pass through to Kindle. Is ridiculous. Oh man, I feel like there's one more point I wanted to make. I think, I think the big thing is a good book to a person that's not a freaking double lobotomy. A good book is going to be a little quirky. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be told perfect. There's going to be a little bit of jank in it. There's going to be things embellished upon because the author thought that they should be for the sake of the story, not what is very clearly these authors padding the shit out of something and then hiring somebody from Fiverr to finish ghostwriting it for them and then just run it through Grammarly AI or what. Like, this stuff looks like it was written by an AI. They all look the same except a couple words change. And then you read the reviews, and the reviews look like they were written by an AI. And I'm just like, man, someone was so balls deep in this story that they wrote a review that is like a line by line synopsis of the whole story and the motivations of every character. Give me a break. It's shit just like so fake. It's like, is there like a Fiverr review service where like Fiverr's review your books for you and just put the shit in AI and shit it back out? Like, what a joke. So I'm gonna do a future podcast where I highlight a couple, because the big base book sale is coming up again, and probably about half the books I've enjoyed have been from there, but a lot of them have been stinkers. But I think that's just due to the commercial viable product thing, where you're just like, it's like you're eating toast with like nothing on it or something, and it's not even really toasted that well. You're just like, oh yep, this is a piece of bread that that got sort of toasted. Next, can I get some jelly? No. Okay, can I get an English muffin? No. Says your piece of toast with nothing on it. I feel like that was kind of the last point with the writing thing I wanted to make right now. I think I'll say like the things that I needed to improve for sure. And I'll thank my friend Jabonzi for this too, because he kind of helped me put some of the pieces together, is they really care about the author. So if a lot of people I talked to said if they find the author interesting, they'll check out the book pretty much no matter what. And so I needed to put more of myself out there, which I kind of did, but not well enough. They also need like an intro to the book series, and I've never really done a good job at that. And they need to know exactly what the genre is, and I've never really done a good job at that either. I did okay jobs at all these things, but obviously not enough. And I take full responsibility for that. The readers told me loud and clear exactly what they want. And if I don't make those things super easy for them, they're going to leave in like 10 seconds. You got to have a really good blurb. You've got to be up front with the genre. And you have to let your personality come through. And they want to know if you're an indie author or not. That's the other thing, and I probably still don't do a good enough job about that. But there's a lot of these authors, they act like they're indie authors, but they have multiple ghostwriters. They have the full weight of a giant publisher behind them. It's like, okay, you're an indie author, sure, but you're officially published now, so you're like a number one bestseller in your genre. So you're an indie author, but it's time for you to start helping people, figure out the secret sauce. Or I'm going to be convinced, just like I always am with streamers and everything else, that it was dumb luck and you have no idea how you got there, and that's why you won't help anybody, because you're scared. So I've had a lot of takeaways from this. I made a trailer video for my first book. I made a new trailer video for myself as an author and for Pain W Affliction and Bunker Codes. And we're doing the rebranding for the book covers because the book covers do really help, because they need the book cover to tie together with what they expect to be looking at, because it all needs to fit together and be something that's recognizable. So if it's sci-fi, dystopian, post-apocalypse, the cover has to look like it, or their brain's gonna think that something's off, even though I think that's wrong. If the cover looks wrong, I think rightfully so. Not rightfully so. I think wrongfully so, but I think their brains have been conditioned. And it's not just indie authors that do this. Some of the biggest publishers on the planet have changed some of the best book covers ever made to plain dog shit. It's very common. It's been blogged about for years. The weird thing is, common sense would tell you to not judge a book by its cover, because those are all amazing books where the publishers put stupid covers on them. But still, I don't know why readers. It has to look the part for them to accept that the book is what it says it is. So our book cover rebranding's almost done. We only have a couple book covers left, and then we're going to get them in print. And then I got to work on the blurbs. I got to get the blurbs better. And then and some people said I need to have like a recap at the beginning of my books. So from now on, when I go touch my books up, they're going to have recaps. They're going to have table of contents, even though I don't think I need them. But they're going to. It's going to just take like 2 button clicks. And then people also said they want all of the books posted in your book, so they have easy access to know what the whole series is. And I need to work on that too, but that's a lot of work. But I got to do it. That'll all be part of the rebranding. So I think that's all the author stuff I want to talk about for now. And this is going to be the end of part numero uno. And we'll get to part 2 after I go find a Gatorade. Alright. Part 2. Where were we? Oh, man. Non-book stuff. Well, I'll just say really quick. Ghost Company 2 is like 95% edited and the book cover's done. So Ghost Company 2 will be out really soon. I've been talking to libraries. That was another big feedback. Most of the readers aren't on Twitter. Most of the readers are still in libraries. There's kind of 2 different kinds of libraries. There's kind of a more private-y type of library. And then there's more of a public-y type of library. So if any of you are writers, you got to get your books into both types of libraries. No, you're not going to make any money, but you're at least going to have people reading your book. So private-y type of libraries, there's a vetting process, and they'll put stickers on them, and then Bob will be your uncle. For public, I'm still not sure yet. I need to go talk to him. So I was focusing on the closer library first, which is kind of a private library, and I got to get a hold of management. But they have a suggestion process too, so we'll see. My feelings are still hurt pretty bad over a distribution deal I had at a gaming store, but I should have jumped on the gun. I should have jumped on it faster. I was scared. I was scared of rejection. I was scared of losing a friend. I was scared of losing a resource. And I bent over backwards for this guy and basically got hosed by his wife and his mom. And when I needed them the most, they acted like they've never seen me before. After I literally helped run their store through Christmas. Met his whole entire family. Anyway. And then he just stopped returning my phone calls, and real bummer. And so this library thing is kind of, I'm not going to make any money off it, but if any of you out there are fans of mine, if you know of any private or public libraries, if you could talk to them, it's entirely possible that suggesting my books to them, if they're a more private style library, they might decide to take them on, and that would be extremely helpful. Public libraries usually don't have any money, so you got to donate them. But I'm opening to helping with that too, if you're serious about helping get the word out. Man, it's windy out there. So that's kind of the writing stuff for now. Let's get to prepping stuff. I want to talk about radios. This is going to be all over the place. Man, I can hear the wind through my earplugs. These are like pretty good earplugs that I'm wearing. Anyway, I took my radio tower down. I made a little radio tower out of PVC. I took it down knowing that the storm was coming, and that was definitely the right move. We've had a massive cell phone hack and at least 2 massive social media hacks in the last 2 weeks. And it takes, and we've had power outages in the last 2 weeks. Like, it doesn't take much to knock comms out. A lot of YouTubers harp on radios, saying that you need to get them done. I don't fault them for this, but until you dig into it, you kind of don't really understand what that means. And you kind of need somebody who's going to beat the radio drum, as it were. So think of the prepper YouTubers as people just kind of reminding you, if you're the one person in your mutual aid group, YouTubers aren't telling you that you just need to magically know all this stuff. That someone's got to go beat the drum, because usually in every group only one person ends up doing it, which is okay, and that can work just fine if you link with all the other groups, one comms person. But it takes a lot of people to set up a comms network. And the reason why is, if you can go to repeaterbook.com and punch in your zip code, find out where your repeaters are. You got to get out a topographical map. You've got to get out a compass. You have to kind of put code words for all your group members and do overlays and stuff to make sure that your group doesn't get compromised. Then you have to sit there and see who can connect to which repeater, and you might go, oh, the repeaters might be down, XYZ, the repeaters are going to have 1 million people. Like, all those things are true, but if it gets that bad, you're all not going to be able to talk to each other anyway, until civilian sat phone stuff gets a little bit better, to where you can just talk through the satellites through your phones, and unfortunately a lot of that's got pushed back. So I thought it was going to be here by now, but I'm sure they don't want us to have it for a lot of reasons that we'll get into some other time. So repeaters are your best bet, right? So everyone's got to get a topo map, got to get a compass, you got to go in repeater book, you got to map where every single one is, you got to sit everybody down, get a compass out, the other kind of compass, and a ruler, and you got to see who can hit every tower. And then you got to get out with, your 4, 5, 10 watts. See who can talk to the tower, see who can listen to the tower. And yes, it's a pain in the butt. And yes, some of you it's going to be the front of your house, and some it's going to be the sides, and some it's going to be the back. But I tell you what, the towers are all privately ran, and the people that run those, they turn it into like a measuring contest over how redundant they can set those things up. It's part of a ham's measuring contest over how good they can set up towers. That's how they get their jollies. So if you find a tower that everybody likes, somebody owns that. There's a club, if you go in repeater book, and you can all be a part of that club, and you can help them beef up that tower. And that's how you make friends. A lot of people say, oh, those ham mean people, and those hams are mean. And well, that's all their equipment that they own. They have the right to tell you to not use that equipment if you're not going to be certified. And a lot of people talk down to them, but hams are usually apolitical. They don't try to sell you anything. They don't cuss or swear. They usually are all over the board politically, but they won't talk about it, You just ask them how the weather's doing. You just ask them how the roads are. you know? Like, they're just easygoing people for the most part. Like, you just don't F with them, you know? I really don't like how people talk down to hams. I think they get a really bad rap. Anyway, I'm not going to solve that. I'm not ever going to be able to solve that problem, but I just want to bring that up. Like, when you're on somebody's repeater, you're in their home, metaphorically speaking, so you don't be a dick on people's repeaters. But, you're going to need some handhelds. You're going to need some 25 watters. You're potentially going to need a radio tower. Like, and that sounds like scary, and that sounds like a lot of equipment, but hams always buy way too much radio stuff. And so they usually have stuff that they can sell for cheap, or you can on Amazon and buy radio stuff for really cheap. You can also make a lot of your own radio stuff. There's a lot of electricians out there, you probably don't realize you can make a lot of your own radio stuff and just didn't know it. So making a copper J-pole is shockingly doable just from random parts at Home Depot. And you can have a 2 meter and 70 centimeter pole that works better than pretty much anything you can buy. From China, rather. So I want to talk about like dedicated ham radios, and I want to talk about digital radios really quick. Almost everyone's familiar with the Baofeng, or they're familiar with Midlands. Those will have their place. Baofengs, well, once you get into radios, you realize they're insanely limited. And you're going to want to look at the TYTs. You're going to want to look at the Yaesus. You're going to want to look at the other one that I always forget. TYT, Yaesu, and Baofeng. And oh, that wind is so crazy. Nah, I'm forgetting the name of the other one really quick. I don't want to dig through my stuff. It's daylight savings, and so it's now 2:30 in the morning magically because of bullshit. But like with radios, each one's going to have kind of a different use. They're kind of like rifles and pistols, right? Like if there was a magic rifle or pistol that did everything, there would need to be a million of them. It's the same thing with radios. Like you might want, and I'm not a lawyer. None of this is lawyer advice. I'm just a person talking about stuff. But there's encrypted radios out there. You may or may not decide that's something you need to get into. So you might have a radio for that, for like convoy, really low power convoy or whatever for your business or whatever. But you might want to have another DMR, digital radio, to talk to digital repeaters, because you might really like that. There's digital repeaters out there. You might want, but then you got to learn about code plugs and stuff, which isn't the end of the world, but it is a big learning curve. Or you might want a dedicated ham radio. Well, then you get a Yaesu. But then you realize that they've gated out a bunch of frequencies, potentially. You realize in some of their models, like the FT60, they farmed their software out to this third party that not only requires you to log in to their website with a code to download the software, like this is the 90s, like this is the mid-90s. Not only is there a code to download the software to begin with, but there's another code to install the damn software, even though you just had to put in the code to download the damn software. So F you, Yaesu, and your pretentious freaking tech support. I don't know. Maybe they're just sick and tired of hearing it, but that's like the shittiest thing you could ever do is make objectively an extremely nice radio with probably the worst manual setup through the dial pad ever made. And then you gatekeep out a bunch of frequencies, and then you make a double web required registration, which means when the shit hits the fan, the FT60 is going to be stuck with whatever, unless you bring the booklet with you. It's going to be, and a physical copy of the repeater book, which I have several, but still, like, you're on the repeaters and someone tells you a new repeater, you got to try to write it down and manually plug it in, even when the shit is fan, we'll still all have laptops. But, if you don't have it pre-installed on your laptop, you're not going to be able to use it. So what happens when those servers go down? You just won't be able to use your FT60 anymore. So I'm still pretty pissed about that. I think Ringo's upset at the storm. That's part of the problem. This is going to sound really shitty. I'm not a lawyer. All this where they've gate kept out tons of the frequencies, but you buy a radio from China, you still get them all. I'm not advocating that anybody breaks any laws, but if it's the shit is the fan, it's the end of the world, and you're broadcasting on low power and use just the basic radio etiquette of not stomping all over everybody else who's also trying to survive shit it's the fan, all of your radios should be able to operate on all the frequencies that they can broadcast to, because the rule is survival, not worrying about the FCC. Now, I want to be clear, if there's any FCC people listening to this, I think you do probably some of the most important work there is. I know you're the people that keep people from abusing the phones for spam calls and stuff, and I know you keep people off, the Marine bands. And the FCC does a lot of really good work. They get a really bad rap. However, I think radio manufacturers have interpreted their guidance with very heavy hands and gatekeeping out a lot of frequencies on a lot of radios. And for some stupid reason, you could buy exactly the same radios online that don't have that all. And I don't break the law at all. And you shouldn't either. However, in shit it's the fan, you kind of need your radios to work on all the frequencies. If it's like emergency life or death and you're on low power and you're not stepping on anybody and you're saving somebody's life, I don't think the FCC was intending on essentially bricking all these radios. Like, a radio's a radio. I don't think they were sitting there like, hey. I don't know. I feel like things got lost in translation somehow, because the radio is like our baby. And maybe I'm wrong, but they don't strike. The FCC's never striked me like how the ATF is. And I think the reason why I believe that is because the FCC almost unilaterally allows the ham community to self-police. They're like they're like the only three-letter agency that does that ever. Like out of all of them, they trust the ham community to self-police. You know, and I think that's the way it should be. So, if you're buying radios, here's my whole point to this. If you're buying radios for Shit Hits the Fan, as much as I love, and I mean I really, really love buying stuff locally, like from a ham store, and we have an amazing ham store where I used to live. The 100% chance that those radios are going to be gate kept out of giant chunks of the frequencies that you're going to want to use when the shit hits the fan. You know, like little things, like all your radios being able to talk to each other. Which again, if you're on low power, you're not hurting anybody. You know, in the city, it's only going a half a mile, and outside the city, if you're down in the valleys, it's going a couple miles at best. You're not bugging anybody. You're not disrupting any other electronic equipment. I mean, it all has to comply with whatever the other FCC rule is. The actual one of the important FCC rules, which is electronic devices can't interfere with each other. See, like I said, the FCC does important stuff. So that's one of the ones I agree with. Which is funny because there's still cell phones where like you can't have the cell phone too close to your monitor. Like there's a lot of that stuff where I don't know how it managed to fly. Let's see here. Open up my FT60. So I really greatly regret my FT60 purchase years ago. Part 15 of the FCC rules. Subject to the following conditions. The device may not cause harmful interference. This device must accept any interference. See, like, yeah, see, there's good parts of the FCC, like, boy, if that wasn't a rule, like, all of our electronics would destroy all of our other electronics, and that would be a huge problem. That would be a massive problem. So, anyway. So yeah, beware buying Yaesu FT60s. I first found out the hard way when I used to be a part of a citizen response group, a local FEMA approved citizen response group, and we were doing a drill, and I could hear, but I couldn't speak, and so I couldn't really be a part of the mission. And it was pretty comical to be a part of a citizen, response group, an official FEMA response group, and everyone running around with baofangs. Because I mean, they just work well usually. There's just a whole can of worms there. It's pretty funny, actually. But I mean, in an emergency, if there's like an earthquake, which is actually how these groups got started, was to make sure all the first responders could survive the aftermath of the earthquakes and save everybody. If you're broadcasting on low power to coordinate a search effort, you should just be able to use whatever radio. It's just common sense. So use your best judgment. I'm not a lawyer. That you gotta do a lot of education though. Digital radios have a massive learning curve, but with digital radios you can broadcast clearer signals on way lower power because it's just ones and zeros. It's not analog. That's an insane game changer. But the radios are more expensive and they're a little bit more frustrating, and there's a little bit more workarounds you need to do if you want your digital to work on analog properly as an analog backup. And if you want to be, again, check your local legal stuff on changing what frequencies your radio is supposed to be gated off. But here's the thing. Nobody's going to know. If you're broadcasting on low power, nobody's even going to know. And if you're talking to other people on analog, low power, they're only a couple miles away. And if you're not stepping on their frequencies, you just move to another one. A radio is a radio is a radio. Just the common sense, etiquette rules apply. Don't step on each other. Don't swear. Don't talk in codes. Don't try to sell anything. Don't play music. Just the regular radio rules apply. And when you go to get your ham certification, that's a huge chunk of it. You're just learning how to not be a dick on the radio, because that's important. We all share it, and we're self-policing, and it's kind of the social contract you go through. It's like, by accepting this radio, you're accepting like a social contract, just like a car. Don't drive through stop signs. We all have to coexist on the road. We all have to coexist on the radio, because lives could very easily matter. There's a reason why search and rescue uses radios, and why it's the go-to. That's why NOAA is still on the radio. So I think that's kind of what I've... TYT... Why can I not remember what my other radio is? I can't remember what my digital radio is. MD390. Huh. I'm totally spacing out. Hold on, I don't know if I'm going to edit this or not. We'll see. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to talk about next. TYT. Definitely not opening an ammo can right now. It's definitely not has my radio in it. Where are you? Why do I always forget what you are? Anytone. Gosh darn it. So yeah, TYT, Anytone, Baofeng, and Yaesu are kind of the big ones. And some of them have slightly spin-offy type of Chinese names and stuff, so it gets a little confusing. I had this all in there, perfect. Oh, sorry, this is probably really super loud. I'm gonna have to edit this out. This thing picks up the highs like really bad. That's the one thing I don't like about these is they pick up these headphones the highs really bad. So things like plastic bags are like the worst sound on the planet. Okay, yeah. So that's topic number 2. Throw any questions down in the comments if you have any radio questions. And stay tuned for part 3. One more thing about radios before we move on to city stuff. The reason why, the biggest reason besides shit, it's the fan emergency stuff of like keeping out certain signals, certain frequencies is so frustrating, is because it's half the time you can't figure out if your radio's not working because you're just on a frequency that you're not supposed to transmit on, even though you would be hurting absolutely nothing by transmitting on that frequency. Nobody's even on it. But your friend might be on it with a different radio, just for whatever reason, hypothetically in Minecraft. And you're like, is the radio screwed up or is it just not working? Or is the radio like blocked out from this frequency? Like, there's no way to tell. And that's how I kind of got left high and dry on my training mission that I was on. I'm like, oh, well, I bought this $115 hunk of junk. It is really good at talking to repeaters, though. And that's the problem. You know, my Anytone is really good at talking to repeaters. But it requires a base station. My Yaesu is really good at talking to repeaters, and it's a teeny tiny thing. You know, the TYT is really good at, you know, digital stuff. You know, I mean, and that's the other thing. The Anytone software, the Baofeng software, and the TYT software, even though there's learning curves, all three of those are really easy to use. The Yaesu software, the stuff that requires like double server authentication just to program a damn radio. Absolutely insane. And then you ask them, oh, we contracted it. Yeah, I know you did. Idiots. Like, there's very few things I wanted like refunds in my life. But I would love that Yaesu so much if it didn't have a ton of blocked frequencies and if it had open source software. But the open source software does not work with it. And you can easily brick it, and then it's not covered anymore because they can tell. So don't buy Yaesu FT60s unless you're going to buy one from China. And then repurchase the software. And the cable. It requires a proprietary cable too. Gosh, do we want to talk about cables really quick? USB cables. We'll talk about USB cables some other time. It's like now 3 o'clock in the morning thanks to stupid daylight savings. So let's talk about the city really quick. Whether you agree with the Palestine protests or not, or the fact that a lot of their slogans are just absolute GEO SIDE, calling for the extinction of entire culture, whether or not you agree with whoever side you're on, or if you're on either side. It's the new George Floyd hotness regarding protesting. It's going to be the new hot button. It has been for a while. They just blocked the freeways again today for an hour and a half, and there wasn't a single cop. There wasn't a single state patrol. There wasn't a single state police. They blocked a major freeway for an hour and a half with total impunity. I think this, coupled with New York essentially falling apart, I guess earlier today, or yesterday now, there was some kind of a disagreement between a boyfriend and girlfriend, and she got shoved down onto the tracks and lost both of her legs. Just total lawlessness. And whenever this happens, blood in the water. I call these like blood in the water moments because it shows how really the whole system's on like a, be on your best behavior. We have social contracts. Don't block the freeways. When they see that nothing happens, it makes them 1,000 times more emboldened. They've been blocking the freeways now since the beginning of January. Before that, they were blocking all the New Year stuff and Christmas stuff and shopping. This Palestine's situation isn't going anywhere. For obvious reasons. Again, whether you agree with it or not, one side still has a bunch of hostages that they don't want to give up or even verify how many are left, and the other side's got some blood in the water, and so they've got something to prove. And so if you're like, wow, is that how you just linked it all together? Yeah, exactly, because here's why. The people that are protesting around here are protesting for that. Well, or against it. That depends on how you look at it. That unrest over there is fueling the unrest over here over exactly the same thing. And now the cities have blood in the water because they're not doing anything about these protests. And the protesters are going into the city halls and getting them to declare ceasefires and stuff, but they're not going to last. And there isn't going to be a ceasefire until the hostages get released, or at least identified, and see which ones are still left. And so you've got to trip check. You've got to be prepared. But unfortunately, like a lot of the places people work are very prohibitive in the self-defense department. What I call those non-permissive environments. You're going to be told that you can't have the tools to defend yourself. But gosh, these protests are everywhere again. And it's only a matter of time before they spill over because of the our border situation. So I don't know what's going to tear apart the country first, but what I do know is everything in my books is coming true, and it has been coming true for a while. And regardless of the sleeper cells, regardless of the protests, I still think we're going to get hit with a grid down. I think it's going to be mostly cyber. And you have got to be preparing for a grid down, and you have got to be preparing for civil unrest. And probably be preparing for another bioweapon just in case. Sooner or later, one of these bioweapons is going to be the real one. And I really, out of all the bingo card, I don't want a bioweapon. I don't want us to get hit with a bioweapon. It's just so frustrating. I think I would rather take grid down than an actual working, functioning bioweapon. Viruses are just so unpredictable. Speaking of which, there's also a big pharmacy hack. I want to talk about the pharmacy hack really quick. That had a bunch of unforeseen second order effects. So people have mail order pharmacy stuff, right, that maybe didn't get screwed up, but people we talk about all the time, you might not get your meds, you might not get your meds. But I don't think anyone that said that ever really thought that, like, the pharmacies could get hacked. and then you're really not getting your meds because they don't even know who you are, let alone they can't order anything or distribute anything. So this happened to us back during the height of the Rona, where you had to get like a PCR test to go anywhere and do anything, which wasn't the end of the world. The problem was it was insanely expensive, and I didn't really care. It's just annoying and expensive. So, 99% of the time you just don't go anywhere. Anyway, we went to go get them from the main normal doctor place, and all their systems were down. They couldn't even schedule. They couldn't process any of the tests. They couldn't schedule any tests. The website went to 404, like they were down. And you realize like medical, like the pharmacies are even, going back to the whole blood in the water thing, like they're even more sensitive to outages than it appears. Same thing with cell. Man, you could snap your fingers and cell could go down the internet. And if cell's down for a lot of people, the internet's down. Like, and as long as the grid's up, we have water. But like, man, you've got to plan. You've got to plan for water. You've got to make sure if you have a well that you've got to bypass, or that you've got hand pump wells bypasses or something. Like, we're gonna get hit with cyber on the grid. I think they're just waiting to push the button. A lot of people were saying like, well, that'll shut down the election. So we'll see. Obviously, you can't pump your gas. A lot of other things too. I don't know. So I do know they want everyone to keep going back in the office more. It's that same doom loop, People are still, businesses are still leaving the cities en masse. Because the break-ins are just like every day. The vehicle violence, the vehicle deaths are just through the roof. Supposedly the gun deaths are down just a little bit, but the vehicle deaths are like way up. And it's because people are driving like absolute maniacs. And there's just a big disconnect with management. I think a lot of them, are grandfathered into their houses, so they don't have to drive very far, and they're just immune to everybody driving like maniacs. But it's bad. The road rage is bad. Commercial real estate's going to crash. Another bank just crashed the other day. And there's going to be a lot more small banks crashing, because smaller, medium-ish banks are the ones that bankrolled commercial real estate. And they can't turn commercial real estate into low-income residential fast enough. Oh man, I can't remember his name. There is a great YouTuber in New York that was a real estate YouTuber, but he switched over. He came over to the dark side. And one of his most recent videos is exposing like the rampant corruption and how this massive these massive hotels have been sitting vacant for years. And then all of a sudden, they switch hands a few times, and all of a sudden they can open them up for migrant housing, but not homeless housing. Some of them homeless, some of them, quote unquote migrant housing. And he's been exposing that. His videos have been amazing. He's come over to the dark side. And then on Twitter, there was a guy losing his shit from some state talking about how he needs first month's rent, last month's rent, a background check, a security deposit, a pet deposit, 3 references, to get an apartment. But the folks coming down from the south are getting apartments like for free, and there's not even any documentation on them. See, people get upset. Don't call them undocumented. But like, actually, the more I think about it, the more I've started calling them undocumented. Just because literally there's no documentation on them. And that's so scary, them running around with no documentation. No identification. I mean, you can call them unidentified. You can call them undocumented. I've got a lot of problems with conservatives too, so don't mind me. I'm not going to call them undocumented most of the time, but if I'm specifically talking about the fact that they lack documentation, that's what I'm going to call them. Because, like, what do you do? Well, no. I'll tell you what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have ICE come get them. Is what you're supposed to do. And then they can run their fingerprints and ID and actually figure out who they are with, Interpol and whatever. That's what you're supposed to do, but these places have been dropping the ball. Which is kind of why, like, busing them in to blue cities is pretty funny. But it's also extremely problematic because they're not documented. They could be anybody. And the trafficking is really bad. So I'm off on a massive tangent. But that all boils back around to, like, turning commercial real estate into commercial, like, residential. And homelessness is already through the roof. This thing with our southern friends, our suspiciously military age southern friends, and where they're all going to be housed. Now the Chinese ones get their own special housing. So I'm going to leave with this. I had a really long conversation with my brother, and I want to be clear about something. There's no way to vote your way out of this. We've had mail-in voting. The day that they switched to mail-in voting, every election suspiciously has gone their way. Suspiciously since then. Weird. I don't know why. You can do your own research. So there's no way to vote your way out of this, no matter how charismatic and compelling of a person you're putting forward. Number 2, you can't run away from this. Go move to Idaho, Utah, whatever, Nevada. These people are going to follow you. They're going to landlock you, and you're just delaying the inevitable. Number 3. I'm sure there was a number 3. You can't comply your way out of this. You can't. Oh, the conservatives are just so fake. They won't just all vote. These elections couldn't be manipulated if they would all just vote. But it's like record low voter turnout. So not only is the vote being manipulated, but they refuse to go out and vote anyway. And that's how the manipulation is allowed to happen, because they just want to sit there, my vote doesn't matter. Look, it is a single party system, okay? They all have the same donors. They're all told to vote the same way. All this budget stuff is like bipartisan across the aisle voting. It is a uniparty. It is. Your vote still matters, though, locally. And that's the final point I want to make. The people coming over here, our southern friends, are all making little tribes. The homeless all make little tribes. And that's what your local area needs to be. It needs to be your little tribe. Your neighbors need to be your buddies. Okay? You gotta look out for each other. It's the only way we're gonna get through this. Your neighbors have got to be your buddies, and that might mean getting a night scope. It might mean getting a drone. It's going to mean setting up radios. It could mean getting armor and a modern rifle. And a lot of new tools. It's going to mean pulling your own weight with your garden. It's going to mean ordering some dirt, putting up some LED lights. You've got to be a part of a tribe. There's a reason why tribes have worked across the whole world for thousands and thousands of years. This whole modern thing that we're doing right now doesn't work. And this is showing that it doesn't work. So you gotta get right with your little tribe. And plan on having your little training hub in the middle of your town. And you gotta be ready to defend your town. And I'm gonna leave you with that because my sinuses are crapping up. And yeah, there's a lot more that I could go over, but I'm gonna leave it up to y'all in the comments and let me know what you want me to go in more. If you want me to do a whole thing about radios or a whole thing about armor, I don't know much about drones. Radios, armor, batteries, modern defensive tools, knives, metal. There's other YouTubers that dive into a lot of that stuff, but I could definitely get you started. But to be 100% honest, I've told people this many times, like, that is all in my bunker codes books because I've been asked those questions so many times. So if you don't already own a copy of the bunker codes, check it out. And if it's not in there, I can put it in there. Or eventually work on bunker codes. Bunker codes too. But all the battery stuff's in there, all the radio stuff's in there. The gardening stuff's not in there, but I'm still learning that. The solar panel stuff's in there. I'm pretty sure the armor stuff's in there. I think I talk about AR-500 and composites and soft body armor. The flashlight stuff's in there, I think. Oh, the lighting stuff might have ended up in the hardbound. The hardbound's got a lot more about the lighting. Light. You think light and light discipline is simple, but that is a whole can of worms. Anyway, what do you guys want to talk about? Let me know down in the comments, and I'm gonna go back to the old saying that I used to say. The only way we make it through this is together. So take care of yourselves. Don't let the darkness consume you. Stay out of the freaking cities. Stay out of the cities. Don't forget to trip check. Have ways to defend yourself. Don't try to drive through mobs. That is the stupidest thing on the planet. Just reverse out if you can, slowly and carefully. Never, ever, ever drive through mobs. And take care of yourselves. We're getting really, 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 really close. Yeah. We'll talk more later. Leave a comment if there's anything you want me to go over. I wanted to say one more thing. This is the next morning, and we survived at least the first part of the storm. Although I see the storm rearranged some of the backyard, but that's okay. We had to batten down the hatches, and it seemed okay. Anyway, so I'm still alive. Obviously, if you're seeing this, well, maybe not. Could have put it on a timer. Anyway, so I'm still alive. Everything's fine. I woke up this morning to Mr. Musk retweeting the Babylon Bee, making the joke of Daniel Penny arrested, NYC forced to deploy National Guard to protect Subway, which that's not a joke. That's something the second I saw National Guard deployed in New York, I immediately thought of Daniel Penny. So Daniel Penny graduated in 2016 in high school and spent 4 years in the Marines, making it up to sergeant, and he had the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal, and basically he was riding the subway one day in New York, and there was a guy there threatening to kill people, and so court cases say he put the person that was threatening to kill everybody, who I think had prior incidents as well. They say he put him in a prolonged chokehold, and it ended up to him, the guy that was threatening to kill people, not making it. And obviously there was riots and protests, et cetera, you know the drill. And they left him out, left him high and dry, and he was just being a good Marine, doing what Marines do, and trying to protect people. And as you know, New York City is already like the biggest gun-free zone on the planet, probably besides DC, and hasn't done anything to help anybody. And the reason why I'm bringing all this up, besides to emphasize that Penny, as soon as they had to deploy National Guard in New York, he should have immediately been let free, because I wanted to make this point last night, and it's hard for me to collect all my thoughts and get all my thoughts out and remember them all, the points I'm trying to make. But whether the National Guard had M4s or whatever rifles it was that they're carrying around, they say, well, that's a deterrent. But you're basically accepting the fact that if you have soldiers running around with M4s that have magazines in them, like, the possibility exists for them to be using those, right? Like, I'm looking at the videos, I'm looking at all the photo stills of a couple days ago when they were deployed. All their ARs and M4s, they all have 30-round mags in them. So the uproar about that was extremely muted. So somebody, a former Marine, who is actively trying to defend real people in a real live actual situation, had the book thrown at him. But now there's other military, and it's okay that they're running around with M4s. And presumably these SWAT or sheriffs or whatever they are with their ARs. Some of them look like 11.5 inches or whatever. So 11.5 inches, you know what I mean. So why, it's all optics, right? Like, they don't want people to be able to defend themselves. They want to have a monopoly on the violence, which I think it was Luke Radowski that used to say that all the time. He used to live in New York, and he talked about this a lot. He always say the police are gangs, like they have a monopoly on violence in New York. They will not let you defend yourself. Even if you're a former Marine, they still won't let you defend yourself and everybody else. But then they'll put the actual military in there with, full battle rattle, wearing their carriers and wearing their camo in the subways, which is fine. That's their dress. Like that's probably all they've got to deploy with. But what kind of message? It sent a lot of different messages to a lot of different people, and I thought that was interesting. And some people go, "Oh, martial law," which I'm like, well, I mean, that is kind of like martial law in the subways. But the weird thing is they didn't even, and this is kind of where I started bringing it up last night. They didn't actually even deploy enough troops to guard every station because someone was still able to push his significant other onto the train tracks where she lost both legs. I mean, I didn't get to make this point as well as I wanted, so I'm trying to make it now. Like, they deployed 1,000 military, and they still didn't have enough to defend that gal that lost her, because he pushed her on the tracks right before the train came, which has got to be just terrifying. Like, I can't even. There isn't enough money in the world to sue enough people to put that can of worms back in. You need therapy for the rest of your life, among a million other things. You need a retrofitted house, and they're supposed to defend these people, and they've been systematically removing everybody who tries to defend themselves. And then they put the National Guard in there after disarming everybody, and you're still not safe. And even the people down there were like, "This doesn't make us feel any safer." And some people even thought it was an overreaction, probably because they weren't even aware that the violence was going on. And so, the first thing that came out of my mind was, well, this immediately vindicates Penny, because if they're willing to turn ARs and M4s on their own citizens in a subway to defend, presumably, because I'm sorry, ARs and M4s are not a deterrent. They haven't been a deterrent forever. It takes 2 seconds to get one of those away from somebody. There's videos of that in Seattle where I think some gangbangers were waving around ARs, and a guy who I think was, I want to say he was maybe like an armorer, or I don't know, I can't remember, like a master sergeant. He was like on the qualifying lines all the time or something. I can't remember. I'm not in the military. I'm just doing my best. But he just walked up and just took the AR right out of the guy's hand. Even with the sling, on. I mean, that's a one button detach. Those aren't a deterrent whatsoever. And they haven't been for, I want to say, like 6 years. So my only, the only thing I can draw from that, conclusion I can draw from that, is that they're ready to use those on people. So if the National Guard starts lighting people up with ARs and M4s in a subway, first of all, I don't even think most of them are going to be trained in CQB like that. That's just insane. The guy that they threw in jail was significantly more qualified than probably any of them to actually handle those situations. And the first thing they should have done is let him out and apologized and done everything that they could have to give him his life back, because they have now escalated this, 10 times past. And, you can say whatever you want about, the different kinds of chokeholds, and it's, that's a can of worms. I'm not an MMA guy, so I still don't understand all the different holds. But I get what he was trying to do. He was trying to restrain the guy in between stops until they can find a cop from somewhere. And that's the problem. If you don't have cops down there, you don't have cell signal down there, if nobody's responding to the bajillion cameras they have and emergency buttons and stuff, like, what are you supposed to do? You're just down there and you just restrain them and hope you don't lose them, I guess. I mean, sometimes the fight gets out of them. Sometimes the fight doesn't get out of them. And until any one of us are in that situation, like, if you think you're gonna like put hands on somebody that's out of their mind, you can hit them all day and it's not gonna do anything. You've got to do some kind of hold and hope that your muscles are stronger than their muscles, and it's, you know, I think people have been choked out before and they'll still get up and start fighting again. I know it's rare, but it happens. So like, what do you do? And I don't have the answers, but I think that entire discussion needs to be had in peacetime. But then when you have the National Guard and sheriffs and stuff running around with ARs and M4s, I feel like the chokehold discussion just kind of like left the building. So if you want to know why there's a free penny meme there the whole time, that's why. And I feel like the Ninja Turtles forecasted this a long time ago, and it never got this far because for some reason in the Ninja Turtles they never deployed the National Guard, and that's why I think, which they probably should have, to be honest. But maybe they didn't need to because they just let the Ninja Turtles do their thing. So, and the broader point I wanted to make is that this is coming to DC, this is coming to Seattle, this is coming to Portland, and you've got to be ready to figure it out. You got to role play this stuff in your mind, and you have to train accordingly because your body's got to be ready and your mind has got to be ready. And stay out of the cities. So anyway, that was your extended bonus feature. I felt like a bunch of that needed to be explained, so I'll talk to you all later. Leave a comment. Shoot. Also leave a comment down below if this recording sounded good. I did get some feedback that my recordings weren't great, and I know I'm really trying to work on it, so I'm putting a noise gate on this one. Even though I'm recording this one different, I'm probably going to be doing these volumes and these noise gates. So let me know. I will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.